everybody. I hereby declare opened this meeting number 1833 of the Committee on the Rights of the Child. We are here today to have a dialogue with China on the combined third and fourth periodic report of the People's Republic of China and the second periodic reports of Hong Kong Special Administrative Region and Macau Special Administrative Region, respectively. An especially warm welcome to the very big Chinese delegation, headed by the distinguished Mr. Jia Guide, who is the Deputy Director General in the Department of Treaty and Law in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China. The agenda today is such that we will first have an introductory statement by his distinguished head of delegation. Then I will give the floor to the committee, where we have organized a task force consisting of 6 members, 5 for the convention or the reports on the convention on the rights of the child, and 1 for the optional protocol of children in armed conflict. And the task force members will be the only ones to ask questions during the dialogue. The main rapporteur for China is Mr. Hatem Kotran, who will start after the introductory. Before starting, I would really like to express the wish that we'll manage to conduct this dialogue in a friendly atmosphere. Then, without further ado, I leave the floor to his distinguished head of delegation, Mr. Jia Guide.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Madam Chairperson, distinguished committee members, good afternoon. Today, I'm pleased to receive, on behalf of the Chinese government, the consideration by the Committee on the Rights of the Child of our third and fourth combined report on the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child and our initial report on the implementation of the optional protocol on the involvement of children in armed conflicts. First of all, please allow me to express on behalf of the Chinese delegation our greetings and respect to all members of the committee. The committee has done enormous work to promote the protection of children in the world. The Chinese government will, as always, support your work. The Chinese delegation is composed of representatives from the central government, the government of Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, and the government of Macau Special Administrative Region. So after I make my statement, I'll invite my colleagues, the 2 deputy heads of delegation, to make their statements. The Chinese delegation is the delegates from the central government include officials from Office of the State Council National Working Committee on Women and Children, the Supreme People's Court, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of National Defense, the National Development and Reform Commission, the Ministry of Education, the State Ethnic Affairs Commission, the Ministry of Public Security, the Ministry of Civil Affairs, the Ministry of Justice, the National Health and Family Planning Commission, the State Administration for Religious Affairs, the State Council Information Office, Office of the State Council Working Committee on Disabilities, and our permanent mission to UNOC. Madam Chair, distinguished members, with about 280 million children, China has one of the largest population of children in the world. The Chinese government takes the respect and protection of human rights as an important principle of governance. It has consistently and earnestly fulfilled its obligations under the Convention and attaches great importance to the protection of children's development. On the 20th of November 2012, China held a theme event entitled Narrowing the Gaps and Promoting Equitable Development of Children in celebration of the 20th anniversary of China's accession to the Convention to review and sum up our implementation of the Convention. The Chinese government respects and appreciates the efforts made by the committee in the protection of the children's rights. With regard to the concluding observations made by the committee in 2005 on China's last report, the Chinese government has made serious efforts to implement them in the light of our national conditions and has reflected the efforts in our report and written replies to the list of issues. To ensure a happy life for every child in China is the vision and goal of the Chinese government and of the committee as well. Guided by this common goal, we are looking forward to strengthening cooperation with the committee and to a positive result of this consideration. My delegation will attentively and sincerely to the comments and suggestions from all members and will try our best to give comprehensive answers to your questions. Madam Chair, distinguished members, 3 years have passed since China submitted its report in 2010. Here, concerning 10 aspects, I would like to provide additional information concerning the major progress in China in promoting and protecting rights of children. First, formulation of a holistic work plan on children. Our national work plan embodies our determination, strategic framework and policy measures for advancing the protection of children. In July 2011, China promulgated China National Program for Child Development, the third 10-year program for the development of children that China has issued since 1992. The program has identified 5 basic principles for the promotion of children's development and protection of their rights, namely protection of children according to law, putting children first, best interests of children, development of children on equal footing, and participation of children. In addition, the program has set forth major objectives and policy measures to be implemented before 2020 in 5 areas, namely health, education, welfare, social environment, and the legal protection of children. Secondly, steady improvement of children-related legislation. In March 2012, the National People's Congress adopted the decision on amending the criminal procedure law, which has added 1 chapter of special criminal procedures for juvenile offenders, which stipulated that for juvenile offenders, the policy of education, reformation and rescue shall apply, and the principle of education supplemented by punishment shall be followed. It has further provided for case investigation, conditional non-prosecution, no public trial, and the sealing of criminal records for cases involving juvenile offenders. Thirdly, comprehensive improvement of medical treatment and healthcare services for children. Up to now, China has set up a series of child healthcare mechanisms. On such basis, since 2009, China has provided free healthcare management for children aged 0 to 6 and free vaccinations to children aged 0 to 3. The new rural cooperative medical care system and the basic medical insurance for urban residents have provided full coverage of all children. The assistance scheme for the treatment of major childhood diseases has improved. This scheme, as a pilot project, started in 2010, and now it covers more than 20 major childhood diseases, including leukemia and congenital heart disease. China's children's level of health has improved. In 2012, China achieved ahead of schedule the UN MDGs in terms of mortality rate and underweight rate for children under 5 years old. Fourthly, effective protection of every child's right to education. China has put in place the largest educational system in the world, with 550 educational institutions of all types. In 2011, China comprehensively implemented 9-year compulsory education, with 99.79% of school-age children enrolled in primary schools. In 2012, 2.1165 trillion yuan was allocated from the central state budget for education, accounting for 4% of our GDP for the first time. China takes the promotion of educational equity as its basic state education policy and has made efforts to ensure that every child enjoys equal right to education, and more educational resources are channeled to rural, poor, remote areas and areas of ethnic minorities. For instance, from 2007 to 2013, the central government made a total investment of 28 billion yuan in projects to reinforce and transform junior middle school buildings in central and western regions. In 2010, we started the project to transform weak schools for better compulsory education in rural areas, for which the central government allocated 62 billion yuan. And we provide special subsidies to children of ethnic minorities to facilitate their compulsory education. For instance, kids of farmers and herdsmen in Tibet are provided with food, accommodation, and stationaries. Fifth, focused efforts to improve the child welfare system. The coverage of child welfare scheme has expanded, and China has provided child welfare through 2 channels of providing financial subsidies and welfare services. In 2010, China put in place an independent protection system for orphans. For this system, the central government has appropriated 2.5 billion yuan each year, with a matching fund of 2.4 billion yuan from local governments. About 600,000 orphans and all children with HIV get a monthly basic living allowance of no less than 600 yuan. In addition, a mechanism for increasing basic living allowances has been set up. Arrangements have also been made for the education, medical care, and rehabilitation of these children and their employment, housing, and other matters after they come of age. Sixth, gradual improvement of mechanisms for protecting children with special needs. For migrant children, China ensures that migrant children can get education and healthcare services in places they move into. For left-behind children in rural areas, China has formed a special task force composed of representatives from 12 agencies, including the Ministry of Education. Vigorous efforts have been made to advance the building of boarding schools, kindergartens, children's cultural activity facilities in rural areas. And for street children, China has set up an interministerial meeting mechanism to coordinate the protection of street children. In 2011 and 2012, the central government allocated 1 billion and 2 billion yuan, respectively, from the central fiscal budget to the protection of street children. Currently, there are 1,593 rescue centers for street children. From 2010 to 2012, a total of 477,000 street children were rescued. For children with disabilities, China has encouraged children with disabilities to participate in inclusive education in regular schools and has promoted education of these children in regular classes. The system of substance allowances for both urban and rural residents and the system of medical insurance for major diseases have given priority assistance to children with severely disabled parents or children with disabilities themselves. Seventh, severe punishment of crimes that violate the rights of minors. From 2009 to June 2013, the People's Courts tried 180,000 criminals for their violation of minors' rights and interests. Among the concluded cases, 32.55% of convicts got severe punishment, reflecting the policy of severe punishment of crimes and special protection of minors. Since April 2009, China has conducted a special campaign against trafficking of women and children and has cracked a series of most serious human trafficking cases. Eighth, steady improvement of judicial procedures for juveniles. Our procuratorial organs have improved the case handling mechanism to suit the minors. First, we have introduced the mechanism to certify the necessity of detaining juvenile criminal suspects in order to use less detention and with caution. Second, we have set up a mechanism of having appropriate adults present during interrogation of minors. Thirdly, we have set up a mechanism of conditional non-prosecution of juveniles. Fourthly, we have set up the measures to seal the criminal records of juvenile offenders, which has facilitated the return of juvenile offenders with minor offenses to society. In the trial of juvenile offenders, the courts have implemented the idea of education through trials, focusing on educating juvenile defendants in courts. And the correctional institutions focus on reforming and educating juvenile offenders with emphasis on education, persuasion, and rescue. The correctional institutions have provided juvenile offenders that have not yet completed their compulsory education with compulsory education facilities and have encouraged those who have completed compulsory education to attend higher level of learning. Ninth, prevention of children's involvement in armed conflict. There are no Chinese children involved in armed conflicts, for China has enjoyed peace for a long time. The military service law and other laws have been strictly observed in recruiting citizens into the People's Liberation Army and the armed police. Nobody under 17 is ever recruited for military service. No citizen over 17 but under 18 is recruited for military service unless the citizen volunteers for the army. China has a strict screening and punishment mechanism on military recruitment. 10th, encouragement to the whole society to participate in protection of children. Governmental efforts alone would not be adequate to achieve significant development of the protection of children. Therefore, the government has encouraged and mobilized actively the sectors of society to participate in the course. Take combating human trafficking as an example. The Ministry of Public Security has opened a microblog against human trafficking, which has over 5 million followers, and has provided over 8,000 clues on crimes of human trafficking. The anti-human trafficking microblog has become a public campaign in the Internet era. Madam Chairperson, distinguished members, China has made considerable progress in different aspects in the protection of children's rights. At the same time, we are soberly aware that one can always do better in this field. Due to historical and cultural constraints and our economic social development level, there are still many difficulties and challenges facing China in the protection of children. They mainly include the following. Constrained by cultural traditions, ideas such as priority to children, children's participation have not yet been deeply rooted in all people's mind. Vicious cases involving serious violation of children's rights have occurred from time to time. The existing laws on child abuse and fulfillment of parents' obligations of guardianship can be further amended and improved. The law enforcement capabilities in some areas need to be strengthened. There still exist considerable gaps in child protection between rural and urban areas and among different regions. The financial input in education, although steadily increasing, is still relatively low compared with developed countries. The government's statistical work needs more rational and detailed classifications. The Chinese government will continue to deal with the above-mentioned challenges, improve the social management creatively, and mobilize all sectors of the society to promote children's protection. At the same time, China will enhance its cooperation with the international community, including your committee, in order to overcome all difficulties and obstacles in the way of protection of children's rights. We will make unremitting efforts so that children's rights to life and development can be realized on an equal footing, and all children in China will have a bright future. Madam Chairman, distinguished members, since the Chinese government resumed the exercise of sovereignty over Hong Kong on July 1st, 1997, and Macau on the 20th of December 1999, the Convention on the Rights of the Child has been applied to Hong Kong SAR and Macau SAR. According to the basic law of the Hong Kong SAR and the basic law of the Macau SAR, the two regions enjoy a high degree of autonomy. Therefore, they have prepared their reports on the implementation of the convention themselves, and their representatives will present their reports and answer your questions. This is also why, just now, Madam Chairman pointed out that we have a large delegation today. It is also the reason for a special arrangement for the Chinese delegation. That is to say, after my general introductory remarks, the two delegates from Hong Kong SAR and Macau SAR will make their statements. Now, please allow me to invite the two deputy heads of Chinese delegation, Mr. Lau Gongwa from Hong Kong SAR and Ms. Wong Yi Mui from Macau SAR to brief you on the implementation of the convention in their respective regions. According to the understanding and arrangement, if I understand correctly, they each have 5 minutes for their statement. Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
主席理事
Madam Chair, distinguished members, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to have our head of delegation, Mr. Jia, to make introduction on the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child in the Hong Kong Special Administration. Present here today are my colleagues from social welfare, from education sectors, and also from immigration authorities. Madam Chair, I hope to inform the committee that in the past few years, Hong Kong SAR in the improvement of welfare of children have made remarkable obvious progress, development. In the field of health, our infant mortality rate in 2001 has dropped to 1.7% mortality per 1,000 registered infant registration births, which is one of the lowest in the world. Despite of this, we are also constructing a center of excellence in pediatrics to further enhance the quality of our pediatric care. We have also been increasing resources to enhance the public health care services for our children. In terms of education, we have been deepening our education reform by extending free education to 12 years and introducing a new academic structure. In order to promote the comprehensive development of children, the new structure aims to promote the whole person development and the lifelong learning capabilities of our students. Additional resources have also been allocated to render better support for children with special needs and to enhance the integration of students of ethnic minority background into the community. In terms of social support for families with financial difficulties and hence children in these families, our Commission on Poverty has completed the work of setting a poverty line which will be promulgated at the Commission on Poverty Summit 2 days later, which is going to be held on 28th of September. The setting of a poverty line will help gauge the poverty situation in Hong Kong, facilitate policy formulation, and assess policy effectiveness. It will also provide useful reference analysis and data for the Commission to contemplate targeted measures to help alleviate poverty and promote upward social mobility of grassroots children and young children. Regarding the question of setting up an independent monitoring body for implementation of children's rights, we would like to point out that Hong Kong has a strong heritage of Chinese culture. We firmly recognize the importance of family as the fundamental group unit of society and the natural environment for the growth and well-being of all its members, including children. Our policy is therefore to preserve and strengthen cohesion, love and care within the family. We adopt a family-based approach to provide the necessary care for children and provide appropriate services to families in need. We have also established the Family Council in 2007 to promote family core values in the community. The Family Council examines from the family perspective the government's policies and programs designed for different age groups and gender sectors, including children. Since April this year, it is a mandatory requirement for government agencies to include family perspectives when formulating policies. Therefore, Family Council works with government agencies on the latest children-related initiative. We will strengthen collaboration between the Family Council and the Children's Rights Forum. The forum was established in 2005 to strengthen communication among the government, NGOs, and children on children's affairs. It will serve as a platform for us to listen to children's views in the process of assessing family implications of different policy initiatives. we consider that the current arrangements have been working well to ensure that relevant government agencies will take into consideration the best interests of the child while they formulate policies that may have implications on children and avoid unnecessary layers of bureaucracy. Madam Chair, I wish to reaffirm the Hong Kong SAR's firm commitment to promoting the welfare of our children. My team and I are ready to answer any questions from the committee you wish to ask to have this dialogue. Thank you.
尊敬的主席。
Honorable Chairperson, committee members, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my great honor to attend this meeting and to receive the review of the Commission on Macau SAR's implementation report. I am the Deputy Director of the Social Welfare Bureau of Macau SAR Government. Our delegation is composed of representatives from 8 government departments responsible for child protection and related affairs, Education and Youth Affairs Bureau, Youth Correctional Institution, Health Bureau, Labor Affairs Bureau, as well as representatives from the legal sector and the police force. Since the enforcement of Convention on the Rights of the Child and the optional protocol on the sale of children, child prostitution and child pornography in 1999 and 2003 in Macau, the government and the society have been paying high attention on the implementation and the promotion of the Convention and the protocols. To express our concern for children, the Macau SAR government has devoted huge efforts to implementing and improving relevant strategies and policies. With efforts from government departments and NGOs, the rights of children are now being protected comprehensively, and thus enhancing the healthy growth of children both physically and psychologically. Currently, the rights and development of children are being ensured, whether in the fields of law, health care, education or social assistance. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to highlight the current situation of children, especially focusing on the issues addressed by committee members. In the past 10 odd years, the population has been increasing steadily. At the end of 2012, our total population has reached 582,000, amongst which 87,000 under the age of 18, or 15% of the total population. With local economy going towards an upward trend, the Macau SAR government has keeping on increasing its contribution in child-related works. Regarding medical and health care, all children under the age of 10, as well as primary and secondary students, are entitled to free medical and healthcare services and government hospitals and healthcare centers. Comprehensive services are being offered to enhance the health conditions and to prevent them from sickness, including regular health checkups, growth assessment, diagnosis and treatment of common diseases. At the same time, essential inoculations, including injection of 8 kinds of vaccines against 12 infectious diseases, are being provided. Pediatric and neonatal intensive care units of local hospitals are well equipped, and for educational services, in year 2012, the school attendance rate for kindergarten, primary and secondary schools were 92.1%, 99.3% and 97.6%. And we have started from 2007-08 school year, offered 15 years of free education for children. Various subsidies on tuition fees, stationeries, meals, and textbooks are also being offered. Furthermore, we have also formulated the Macau Youth Policy 2012-2020 and the 10-year plan for non-tertiary education 2011 to 2020 in order to better plan child education and to protect their rights to education. Apart from the above, and for those children who have violated the law, we have social protection regime and education and supervision regime that are applied to them, tailoring for different age groups. And in addition, we also introduced the restorative justice concept so that they can be rescued. And to the disadvantaged children, we have special support and protection measures. And at the same time, we vigorously promote and support NGOs to offer comprehensive services to these children and their families. so that their livelihood are being protected and that they can achieve good personal development. Such support and protection measures are also being extended to those non-resident children living in Macau. In addition, in the correctional institutions, in schools, and in other social service facilities, it is clearly prohibited to inflict corporal punishment against children, as well as psychological or physical abuse. These are considered criminal offenses. Throughout these years, the Macau SAR has devoted huge efforts in promoting the rights of children and to raise the awareness of the general public, childcare practitioners, law enforcement personnel, and children themselves on the convention and the optional protocol. We have conducted many campaigns, including the annual International Children's Day, which is jointly carried out by more than 20 public entities and civil bodies. And we also conduct special theme campaigns and have professional training, seminars, and funding schemes. We also make use of various media to raise public's awareness and to conduct outreach campaign. Madam Chairperson and committee members, in these 2 days, the Macau SAR delegation will extend maximum cooperation in responding to your questions, and we welcome your valuable opinions and suggestions on our work. Thank you.
For these three informative statements updating us on the situation in the three parts of the country respectively. I would like then to give the floor to our main rapporteur, Mr. Hatem Kotran.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Allow me to start by extending a welcome to the multi-sectoral and a very large delegation from the People's Republic of China. It includes distinguished representatives also from the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, as well as the Macau Special Administrative Region. I would particularly like to thank Mr. Jiaguide, head of the delegation, for his preliminary statement, and indeed the kind words that have been addressed to the CRC, the Committee on the Rights of the Child, and I'd like to thank also the assistant heads of delegation, if you like, who have come from Hong Kong and Macau, the special administrative regions. Thank you very much also for your introductory statements. Allow me also to thank the State Party for the information that's contained in the third and fourth periodic report. The second periodic report for Hong Kong Special Administrative Region and Macau SRA on the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and also on the optional protocol to the Convention regarding sale of children, child pornography and prostitution. I'd also like to thank them for the written answers to the list of issues from our committee. These answers are extremely detailed. Indeed, they cover most of the questions that have been put by the committee. The report and indeed the written answers to the list of issues are made up of three parts. They come in separate documents. One that sets out progress achieved as regards the implementation of the Convention in China and the protocol. The other have to do with the implementation of the Convention and the protocol in the special administrative regions of Hong Kong and Macau. So, Madam Chairperson, we do have exhaustive information that has been provided by the State Party, and indeed other documents and information which enable us to have with the delegation a constructive dialogue with a view to a better understanding of the situation of the rights of the child and trends, and indeed follow-up given by the State Party to the preceding concluding observations of the committee adopted in 2005, subsequent to the second periodic report of China pursuant to the Convention. as well as the initial report of China under the protocol. I, in fact, was present myself. Perhaps I was the only member present back in 2005, so it's a great deal of emotion that I feel today, and a great honour for me to be here as rapporteur in order to monitor some of the progress that has been made by the State Party in the intervening period. Our committee welcomes the commitment of China to promoting children's rights, as well as implementing a development strategy in order to ensure that the children have the right to survival, development and protection, as well as participation. I'd like to note with satisfaction in this regard the adoption in mainland China, inter alia, of important legislative measures such as the review of the law on the protection of minors, 1991, which was revised also in December 2006 and October 2012, revision of the law on criminal proceedings, March 2012, as well as the law on preventing juvenile delinquency in October 2012, as well as the law on social insurance, dated October 2010. Also, the administrative regions, the special administrative regions of Hong Kong and Macau, have also adopted legislative measures, important measures, and I will mention just some by way of example for each region, because then we have to move on to the discussion, of course, and questions put to the delegation. But I'd like to quote for Hong Kong the ordinance on the abduction of children as well as custody. There is also an ordinance on the protection of young people and children, amongst others. For the special administrative region of Macau, it is worth mentioning Law 9/2006 of the 26th of December 2006, establishing a legislative framework of the educational system for non-higher education, as well as a law on the 16th of April 2007 regarding adopting an educational system for juvenile delinquents. And I won't mention the others, Madam Chairperson. The accession of the State Party to the main international instruments regarding human rights improves the fact that children can improve and uphold their rights, and children of both sexes in this regard. And we note with satisfaction the accession or ratification by China during the period under review of the following international instruments. First of all, the optional protocol regarding the Convention on the Rights of the Child, this regarding the involvement of children in armed conflicts, which indeed we will be looking at tomorrow, and also the Convention regarding the rights of persons with disabilities. My first question for the delegation is the following. What provisions are being taken, or indeed are being contemplated in the State Party with a view to ratifying other fundamental human rights treaties to which it is not yet a party? Of course, Madam Chair, preference being to the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which establishes a communications procedure, as well as other international instruments which are not yet ratified. And I think everybody is familiar with those. On another point, our committee could welcome the adoption of the National Development Programme for Children 2011-2020 for mainland China, and the head of the delegation mentioned this in his introductory statement. Also, we can welcome the 10-year programme for poverty reduction and the 12th, fifth-year Economic and Social Development Plan 2011-2015 for mainland China. So this is progress that has been made by the State Party. However, in our constructive and fruitful debate, sometimes it's useful to address sources of concern. I will be brief on this, and my colleagues, I'm sure, will follow me in this exercise. My first question, or my first concern, rather, has to do with the place of the Convention in the domestic legal order of the State Party. And we note information contained in the State Party's report, where it appears quite clearly that the Convention is not directly applicable in China. And, as indicated in the State Party's response, this is the response to the very first question of the list of issues, Chinese courts judge in accordance with internal written law, and they are not in a position to directly invoke the provisions of the Convention. So the question would be, given the fact that the Convention is not directly applicable domestically, what provisions are being envisaged by the State Party with a view to adopting either a general law or code on the rights of the child which would transpose into domestic legislation all the all the rights guaranteed by the Convention? It would be useful to know your thoughts on this. We know that you have this law on protecting children's rights, but it would be good to know whether you intend to draft a far more comprehensive law which would ensure that there is transposition of the Convention internally. Moving on, Chair, and this is something recurrent, reservations, and we regret the fact that despite preceding recommendations, the State Party is still maintaining its reservation regarding Article 6 of the Convention, which is an important article. It has to do with a fundamental right, the right to life, survival and development. And we regret that for the administrative regions of Hong Kong and Macau, the State Party has maintained reservations to Articles 32(2) and 37(c) of the Convention. The question, naturally, being the following: what provisions are being envisaged by the State Party with a view to withdraw all reservations to the Convention for all territories under its jurisdiction? Let me now move on to coordination, Madam Chairperson, and the National Action Plan. It's worth noting with interest, as indeed has been said, that we now have a national development programme for children running from 2011 to 2020 for mainland China. It's worth noting also the increasing number of committees and national working groups, as well as regional and provincial working groups tasked with implementing the rights of the child and ensuring follow-up. However, it's worth pointing out that the coordination is still fragmented. The programme is not implemented in a uniform fashion in all the regions and localities of mainland China, and coordination of execution at local and regional levels remains sometimes insufficient. It's worth also noting the response from the Special Administrative Region of Macau, namely that currently there is no global action plan for children. However, the government has been attentive to the development of children and young people and has drafted this youth policy running from 2012 to 2020, as well as the 10-year plan to develop non-higher education 2011 to 2020 in order to ensure the development of children and young people, more particularly safeguarding the rights in the area of education. As regards the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, the committee is concerned at the absence of a global action plan for the implementation of the Convention. Coordination of programmes and policies is rather sectoral and fragmented. It is also worth looking at the pertinence of the response given to the specific question of the committee, according to which a distinct action plan would not add any value and would not give real effect to the Convention. The question, therefore, does the State Party intend to set up and strengthen coordination between the different bodies and institutions that are all working to implement the National Development Programme for Children for mainland China at all levels in order to ensure a uniform implementation in all regions and provinces? Similarly, what steps are envisaged to improve coordination of activities and implementing the Convention in Hong Kong by preparing and implementing a specific action plan? As regards the Special Administrative Region of Macau, what provisions are being envisaged to draft a more global action plan which would cover all areas relevant to the Convention? Let me now, Madam Chairperson, turn to the general principles of the Convention. One of the main principles, and we will be stressing this today, it is the right to life, the right to survival and development, and more specifically, the whole issue of infanticide, selective and forced abortion. This is a recurrent issue, Madam Chairperson, and we note with interest this campaign known as Care for Children, which tries to change the deep-seated social images and traditional preference for boys and promote the recognition of the value of girls. But it's worth expressing a real concern because of the persistence, despite the above-mentioned concerns expressed in the past by the committee, of the practices of infanticide and selective abortion and forced abortion in mainland China, added to which reports setting out the development of forced sterilization and abortion carried out by local civil servants working in the family planning units. These are practices which are exacerbated by the one-child policy and which infringe the fundamental principles of our convention, including the principle of the child's right to life. The question is, what steps are envisaged by the State Party with a view to revising its very rigorous family planning policy in order to combat the practices of infanticide as well as combat selective and forced abortion in mainland China and protect the inalienable rights of each child to life and survival? Whilst thanking the State Party for information provided to the list of issues, particularly setting out the initiative taken by the Ministry of Family Planning to open up inquiries at all levels regarding the crimes committed, I'd like to know what has been the fate of such investigations. What measures are envisaged to ensure that these investigations are carried out rapidly, independently, and that they are rendered public? Another question, Madam Chairperson, and again, this has to do with self-immolation of Tibetan children. The committee is concerned at reports that talk about an alarming escalation of self-immolation of Tibetan children, and indeed the failure on the part of the State Party to avoid this sort of loss of life. The State Party should be addressing the underlying causes of these acts. The committee is equally concerned at reports that talk about detention and imprisonment of Tibetan children who have been accused of so-called incitement to self-immolation, as well as harassment, intimidation of the family of victims. All this, of course, which can exacerbate the situation. We would like to have a response from the delegation on this to dissipate any concerns that may exist in the minds of committee members in that regard. I will stop soon, the final point, because I have to keep an eye on the clock. This has to do with civil rights and liberties and freedoms, and more specifically, the persecution of children of opponents, sometimes even in schools. The committee is concerned at information which reports about persecution of these children, victims of parents, for the simple reason that they have acted, or rather parents who are persecuted because, for instance, they have been trying to uphold their rights because of the deaths of their children crushed in the collapsed school buildings. This was during the devastating earthquake of 2008 in Sichuan. The committee is equally concerned at information saying that Hui Tang is being persecuted, sent to a labour camp because of a campaign to ensure that men are brought to justice because they had raped his 11-year-old daughter. In May, the police detained on the basis of aggression in the Chinese region in Guangxi an activist woman who has launched an online campaign against sexual exploitation of schoolgirls. The committee, Madam Chairperson, is concerned, particularly concerned, at information coming in regarding persecution of the children of activists and opponents, even in the schools. And we would mention the case of Zhang Ani, who is 10 years of age. He wasn't able to go to school because of reprisals against her father, a seasoned activist, Zhang Ling, who is currently in detention. The children of a well-known lawyer, known because of human rights defence, has also been persecuted, and even the mother want to leave the country and get political asylum in the US. My question, therefore, is what urgent measures are being taken by the State Party to prevent persecution of parents who are trying to defend the rights of their children, and to ensure that they prevent the persecution of children of activists and opponents? Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Cotran. I now have to give the floor to myself because I am also a member of the task force. I'm going to speak on some more of the general measures and then on some other topics. First, to the allocation of resources. To mainland China, first, there are large differences among regions and between rural and urban areas with regard to children's rights, which is acknowledged by the State Party in your report. And with the central and western areas being particularly badly off. In your written reply, you give an extensive answer to our questions on your remedies to this situation. And in the areas of education and health, you seem to be providing financial resources directed at children. But I wonder, what about other areas like child protection and child welfare? Do you provide particular funds for the implementation of the National Plan of Action and other plans and policies? Or do you expect the regional and local governments to provide all the funding? I also wonder what you can say about the results of your measures to make these differences less than they've been. Have the regional differences actually been reduced as a result of the measures that you tell us about in the written replies? I also would like to know if you have any budgetary lines for children in vulnerable situations, lines which would be protected in times of crisis or emergency. This would be for children of minorities, indigenous people, children with disabilities, and migrant children, to mention some. Then to Hong Kong, I wonder if you have any budgetary lines for children in vulnerable situations, like children of ethnic minorities, children with disabilities, and children living in poverty. To Macau, we do not have specific information on resource allocation in Macau. So I would like to know from you as well if you have particular budget allocations for children and children's rights, and whether it's possible in your budget to track what is spent on children, including children in vulnerable situations. Then to data collection. For mainland China, there are gaps in the availability of reliable and comprehensive statistical data in mainland China on all areas covered by the Convention, and data are often not disaggregated. We are particularly concerned that your laws and regulations on state secrets seem to hamper the availability of data on issues under the Convention. I wonder if the following data are still classified as state secrets. Cases involving the killing or injuring of children. You did say something about this in the written reply, which I did not quite understand, because you referred to the criminal law, but it seems there's no statistics on this. Other cases, kidnapping of women, including girls belonging to ethnic minorities, cases of abduction of children. Are these data still classified as state secrets? And if they are not, how do you intend to improve the shortage of data? And are you improving also this law on state secrets? To Hong Kong, there is no centralized data collection system in Hong Kong, and data concerning children is scattered among different departments, and in some areas of the Convention there is a lack of disaggregated data. Are you doing any improvements in this respect? And Macau, you still do not seem to have a comprehensive and reliable data collection system. And what are you doing to improve this? Then to independent monitoring. There are no independent national rights institutions in any of your parts of the country in line with the Paris Principles, with a clear mandate to monitor children's rights. To China, in your report, paragraph 16, you say that you are willing to study this issue further. And I would like to discuss it with you now. Would it be possible to set up some kind of independent human rights institution? In Hong Kong, the Legislative Council in 2007 recommended the government to set up a children's commissioner, but the government does not see the need for this. In your written replies, the issue of independent monitoring seems to be mixed up with coordination of convention activities. You also, in this respect, mentioned the Children's Rights Forum, but we know from children in Hong Kong that they are not pleased with this Children's Rights Forum. They do not think that they are properly informed about the cases that are taken. Children's issues are as present in this respect as they should be. I would like to discuss this possibility of setting up a Children's Commission in Hong Kong with you. So also to Macau, do you intend to introduce an independent monitoring mechanism for children's rights? And then to all of you, would you also make it competent to deal with complaints from children, if you would consider such a monitoring body? Then to the dissemination of the convention and training. On the mainland China, you mentioned a booklet and some other printed materials in this respect. But I wonder, do you use the internet at all to perform this function? It's a very effective way, as you know, to inform children and the public about anything, including the Convention on the Rights of the Child, if it's done in the right way. I also wonder if the Convention has been translated into minority languages. To Hong Kong, you mentioned in your report a lot of activities to disseminate the Convention, but I wonder, have you made any evaluation of the effects? And to Macau, the same question, any evaluation of the effects of the dissemination activities? Cooperation with civil society. In mainland China, there are systematic threats, intimidation, enforced disappearances, arrests, etc. of human rights defenders, particularly activists from ethnic and minority groups such as Tibetans, Uyghur Muslims and Falun Gong practitioners. This makes it very difficult for human rights defenders to report on children's rights violations in mainland China and to advocate for reforms and improvements. I would like your comments on this. We could read in the news as late as yesterday that a well-known legal rights activist in China has seemingly disappeared after being questioned by the Beijing airport police. Her name is Cao Shunli, who's not been seen since the 14th of September. Then to child rights and the business sector. Lead poisoning is among the most common pediatric health problems in mainland China. And hundreds of thousands of children, especially in poor and rural areas, suffer permanent mental and physical disabilities as a result of lead poisoning. I wonder what safeguards you intend to put in place to stop this. Do you monitor the laws and regulations that you have for industries in this respect? And have you considered adopting a framework to hold business enterprises accountable to human rights, especially children's rights? I also wonder what you'll do to ensure that those children get proper treatment and compensation and that they are not threatened when they ask for this. To corruption, I know that your new president, Xi Jinping, has launched an anti-corruption drive. I wonder if you are particularly, or he or the government in this respect is particularly targeting corruption in state-run education systems, or in the state-run education system, because it is reportedly overrun by bribery. So this is something I would like to hear about from you, from the mainland China. To non-discrimination, the committee is worried about discrimination in China in general. In mainland China, there are ongoing and systematic violations and discrimination against the children of Tibetan and Uyghur groups and the children of Falun Gong practitioners, particularly with regard to their linguistic, cultural and religious freedoms. There is also discrimination against children with disabilities, children of migrant workers, refugee and asylum-seeking children, children infected with or affected by HIV/AIDS as the stigma. And for these groups, the discrimination is particularly with regard to education, housing, healthcare and other social services. We would like to know what measures you further take to combat these different forms of discrimination. There is extensive discrimination against girls and women in mainland China due to patriarchal attitudes and deep-rooted stereotypes. You mentioned a lot of measures in your written replies, but I wonder, are you taking a comprehensive approach to combat stereotypes, addressing the root causes? And this would go for all the groups that I've mentioned. And I do not mean that you should go into all the different aspects of religion and education and everything, because this is going to be dealt with in other parts of the dialogue. So this is more to the general idea of discrimination in your country, and whether you are aware of it and whether you really do comprehensive work to combat discrimination. And do you have any complaint mechanisms for this? To best interests of the child, a research institute in China says that the biggest challenge to the realization of the best interests is to overcome outmoded conventions and customs and put in place a new outlook of the child or childhood. Do you have any comments on this? What do you do in that respect? Then a more specific question this is to the mainland China, regards children of parents who are sentenced to death. Are their best interests taken into consideration, the children's best interests, that is, in the decision to impose a death sentence on the parents? In Hong Kong, there is no general legislation providing for the best interests of the child to be taken into account as a primary consideration in policy making and in administrative authorities, meaning that the courts have very limited authority to do this or to try this. However, in your report, in paragraph 105, you say that in the Hong Kong SAR, the best interests of the child are necessary considerations which are paramount in all relevant decision making. I would like to hear if you could confirm this as a general commitment in all decision making concerning children, which will really make you then comply with the convention in this respect. To birth registration, it is low in poor and remote areas of mainland China. Among girls due to the one-child policy, among migrant children, adopted children, and children who are born outside of the locally sanctioned family planning limits. That is to say, if a family gets more children than they are allowed to have, their children, they don't take their children for registration. And there are penalties and practices that restrain the parents from registering their children, and there are numerous administrative barriers to birth registration. And the special case is the hukou system, which impedes the birth registration of, in particular, children of migrant workers. Since birth registration is crucial to obtaining all kinds of services, the committee would like to know what you'll do to improve that situation. And that will be all from me in this round. I would then like to give the floor to Ms. Sara Oviedo Fierro for the last questions in this round. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As has already been said by my colleagues, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to you also, and I'd like to congratulate you on the much progress that you have attained, and we can read this in the report. I am tasked with asking several questions with respect to the right for the views of the child to be heard. I will be talking about the participation of children also. In this regard, in the response to the various questions and in the reports you have submitted, I have noted that you are undertaking efforts, and I'm particularly referring here to mainland China. We've seen two major trends of participation. Firstly, there's participation involving a number of acts which are held with UNICEF or other institutions, and you've held these activities to hear the views of the child with respect to the assessment of the plan you have, which is set out in this report. And a second major trend of participation is the fact that many organizations are involved. And I'm referring to the Young Pioneers, the League of the Communist Youth, etc. Now, from the very careful reading of the reports, I have the following concerns. Firstly, we're quite struck by the fact that in the events which are held to involve the participation of children, there are very few children taking part, in fact. You tell us about 280 million children in the country. However, 10, 20 or 30, 60 children, let's say, take part in these events. So we'd like to know if there's been any type of continuity in these events since the submission of the report. Perhaps you've held events where more children have taken part. How can you choose the children who are supposed to participate in these events? It must be a difficult task to do that. And have you gradually then increased the participation of children? I'd like to refer to the other form of participation. That is to say, Young Pioneers, the Communist League, etc. Now, I know there are millions of participants in those bodies. And I'd like to know, what are the entry requirements? What goals and purposes do these bodies have? What type of decisions do they take? What achievements have been attained in the implementation of children's rights? Do these organizations have resources? What type of relationship do they have with the government and the government party? And I'd like to know whether what your experience in that field is. Now, turning to Macau, you've said that you hear the views of the child in appointing guardians, in custody, etc. But we don't find any information or statistics either. So I would ask you where we can find that information, where we can find those statistics, please. And whether there has been a need to carry out promotion activities or not. In the case of Hong Kong, our chairperson voiced one of the main concerns that I have. And I'd simply like to stress one point. I wasn't quite clear whether children take part in this forum. And I'd like to know what other mechanisms are in place for children's views to be heard, for their opinions to be heard, so that they can effectively take part. We know that public consultations have taken place to hear from the various opinions of the various sectors in terms of education. Were children listened to? What mechanisms were used for that? They're the questions I have with respect to that issue. Turning on now to the freedom of thought, conscience and religion, our colleague Hatem also flagged a number of points, so I won't need to dwell on certain aspects. However, I would like to very clearly state that in the previous report, the committee recommended a set of measures to be taken because it would appear that the freedom of religion is not being upheld and respected. And in the research work we have carried out, we've noted this point. And what we're concerned about is the situation of children. We know that an outcome of religious persecution, the persecution of thought, is the fact really that children lose their parents, they are alone, they have to change schools, change provinces, and so on and so forth. These are situations where I'd like to have further information. I'd like to know the reasons for this, and are you taking specific measures in order to ensure the freedom of religion? In this particular case, I would refer to what our colleague Hatem said in terms of Falun Gong. I'd now like to move on to preservation, or the protection of privacy rather. I think we need to commend mainland China for the measures and procedures they have taken in order to ensure that those children involved in judicial processes are protected. But it's not only an issue of protection of privacy, we need to protect the privacy of all children. So how do you ensure the privacy of all children? What mechanisms or regulations do you have for that? How do you resolve the issue of bullying within schools? Because generally, this means that children are faced with a very difficult situation. The same applies to the media. Unfortunately, the media do not have how to ensure the image of children. So what are you doing in that particular sector? What type of procedures and measures are you taking? Turning now to access to appropriate information, for mainland China, we would like to commend you on the information that you've provided and the activities which are enabling children across mainland China to have access to TV programs, libraries, high quality radio programs, cultural activities, and so on and so forth. However, we would like to know the content of the magazines and books. And we'd like to know whether national stations have special programs aimed at children. Minority groups, do they have access to this type of information? Now, there are many regions in the country. Do they have equal access to information? We know that the use of internet is on the rise, as well as the participation of children and teenagers in social media and social networks. And we would like to know whether you are analysing the impact that this is causing and whether there's any type of regulation. What specific measures have you to regulate that situation? In the case of Macau, we haven't been provided with information on that topic and on other issues that I'm responsible for. So I would also request ask Macau for information on the use of the internet and the use of appropriate information. Turning to Hong Kong now. We know that there are a whole set of mechanisms to select discs, videos, programs, etc. Now, we would like to know whether children are taking part in those selection mechanisms. A last point I would like to address is violence. This is violence referred to the abuse and neglect, as well as corporal punishment. And I would also include in that social exploitation and abuse. Now, when it comes to mainland China, based on the information we've taken from the reports, and we've looked through these reports very conscientiously indeed, now, legally speaking, the prohibition of corporal punishment is well established. However, administrative punishment and sanctions have been taken, and corporal punishment is not being punished as such as an act against children. You don't have a clear-cut definition either of what violence constitutes. And children are entitled to compensation, you tell us, and we would like to know, what does this compensation consist of? And we also come across the problem of statistical information. We work on the basis of good faith, and we believe state parties, but we need statistics to be able to measure and assess developments in implementation of the various laws. We're also concerned about the protection of security and safety. You tell us that you apply these as mandated by the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of the Interior. These are three groups of measures. You say for some there are 6, for others there are 8, so we really would like to have a better understanding. We note also that in the information provided to us, you cluster together corporal punishment with sexual exploitation. So I wasn't able to look into sexual abuse, and I do hope here you will tell us about how you deal with these problems. Now, on mainland China, 2 points. I note that the institutional process being set up to eradicate corporal punishment, neglect and abuse is linked to an institutional proposal by women, that is to say there's a proposal by women to eradicate these problems. That's fine. What I'm concerned about here is that mothers are also guilty of abusing children. So how can we ensure, in the logic that you have, that Macau can ensure that these problems are made visible in the country? So we need to be able to eradicate violence. How can you ensure that children are involved in this process of eradication? Because their opinion, their views must not be silenced. In the case of Hong Kong, and you focus on this in recent reports, because of cultural issues, you are not yet in a position to review the possibility of prohibiting abuse in the home. Now, the fact that you're here with us, we would really like to hear from you directly the true causes as to why punishment is not being abolished in the home. Lastly, focusing on torture, cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. In the case of China, we're told that you had to convict over 700,000 persons because of spousal, 72,000 in fact, because of abuse, begging, children being involved in begging and many other crimes. Now, that number of sentences would appear that you deal with hundreds of thousands of cases. How can you explain the fact that so many cases exist related to these various crimes? Because it would appear then from this that torture does exist, that ill treatment does exist. Have public officials been convicted? What specific measures have been taken so that this does not continue to happen? And how many children are involved in this process? We're very much concerned about this in the committee. And what type of problems has this caused for children? Basically, they are the questions I have. Now, in the next round of questions, perhaps we could focus on these issues even further. And thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Oviedo Fierro. I have noticed that I'd forgotten to mention discrimination against children in Hong Kong. So I would like some comments on that too. Children with disabilities, refugee asylum-seeking children, and undocumented children and migrant workers. What measures do you take to combat discrimination and to change attitudes? And as I said before, we only want the kind of more general answer on this now because we're going to discuss the different groups and their situation later on. We'll now have a 15-minute break for you to look into your answers. We'll come back at 20 minutes to 5. Then we'll start again. Welcome back. We are sorry to give you so many questions, and you haven't really had much time to organize them all, but I won't spend any more time and just give the floor to the head of his distinguished head of delegation to organize the answers. And by 5:30, we'll start the new round of questions. So I'm sorry to say you'll have even more questions to answer for the morning session tomorrow. And then in the afternoon, we might go on with a few answers to the CRC, but then we'll also have the questions for the OPAC, which will be posed to you at 12:30 tomorrow. So we'll just start right away. I give you the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I also thank the rapporteur and all the members for your recognition of the implementation of the convention in China. Frankly speaking, we have a lot of questions that have been raised. So in the time that remains, evidently I cannot answer all the questions in the short time that remains. Besides, I have to leave some time to my colleagues from the two regions of Hong Kong and Macau. So if we cannot answer all the questions tomorrow morning, we'll continue answering questions. First of all, I'll answer two questions. First, concerning the revocation of a declaration, the withdrawal of declaration, the reservation concerning Article 6. I would like to say here that concerning Article 6, we did have a declaration. The aim is to avoid misunderstanding of the international community concerning the family planning policies in China. With regard to the respect for children's right to life, this is not contradictory on the basis of law on the protection of minors, we have the definition of children from birth to 18 years old, not including the fetus. In our law on population and family planning and the law on maternity health care and the implementation methods on the law on maternity protection, all these regulations and laws protect the right of women to informed decision concerning contraceptives and childbearing. That is to say, to reduce involuntary pregnancy. The laws and regulations have strict regulations for abortion. The aim is to protect the safety of women and their decision, autonomous decision. Besides, Mr. Rapporteur raised an issue concerning the legal status of the convention, and also concerning whether China is ready to formulate a comprehensive law on the protection of children. Concerning the legal status of the convention in China's law, according to laws and regulations, domestic law, if it is in line with international instruments, domestic law can be applied. That is to say, through application of domestic law, relevant provisions of the international convention can be implemented. If there is a conflict between domestic law and international instruments, unless we have a reservation, in principle, we can also invoke international treaty. So much is my answer to the two questions raised. Just now, among the questions asked, there is a question concerning household registration system for children. So I invite my colleague from the Ministry of Public Security, Mr. Wen Daojun, to answer this question. I'm glad to answer this question. Concerning birth registration, this is the primary right of children, and it is the basis for legal protection and other rights for children. Concerning registration of children, the current regulations have clear provisions. Article 7 of Household Registration Regulation says that within 1 month of birth of a child, the head of household, relatives, guardians or neighbors can go to the registration unit of the permanent residence of the child to register its birth. For abandoned children, the guardian or children's welfare institutions can register for the children concerned. Concerning children under 14 that have been adopted, including orphans that have lost both parents, or abandoned children whose parents cannot be found, or if biological parents have special difficulties and cannot raise their children, in this case, Article 16 of Adoption Law has provisions. That is to say, after the confirmation of a relationship of adoption, public security organs, in line with relevant provisions, should register for the children concerned. Concerning birth exceeding family planning, births out of wedlock, early marriage, children as a result of early marriage, the State Council and relevant organs have formulated regulations and policies which request localities to give it permission to register these children. In year 2001, during our 5th and 6th General Census, the Office of the State Council issued documents asking children who are born not in line with family planning and have not registered, they should be given registration. And registration status should not be the basis for administrative measures or penalty. We can say that in most cases and areas in China, the implementation of such policies and regulations is quite good. Yet in some places, especially in grassroots governments, out of their narrow interests or local interests, or due to their lack of understanding of policies and regulations, their implementation sometimes is not desirable, especially compounded by the fact that ordinary people, especially in rural areas, have weak consciousness of law in this area. So children who are born not in accordance with planning and born as a result of early marriage, some of them have not been registered in the household registration system. With regard to such issues, we will give more publicity to laws and regulations so that all children can be registered after their births. In order to register better all children, in particular girls, we have taken 3 measures. First, units in charge of registration of birth improve regulations and norms concerning birth registration, further improve the network of birth registration. Secondly, Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Public Security have made decisions from January 1st, 1996 In China, we gradually implemented the system of medical certification. This measure is conducive to monitoring birth registration and is conducive to finding out cases of abandoning or trafficking in girls. Apart from registration, ordinary work, regular work in this area, they also carry out large-scale monitoring activities so as to verify erroneous registrations and rectify such phenomena. Concerning the registration of left-behind children, our household registration system is based on the registration in the place of residence. So mobile population, including parents, including children of rural workers, they should go to their place of origin to register. And our financial allocation is based on registration of household in the health, education, and other areas. According to our current regulations and laws, in the residence of long-term residence, if citizens stay longer than 3 days, they should register for temporary residence. At the same time, they should seek temporary residence certificate if they meet the conditions. Concerning children under 15 that accompany such people, they can register with their parents and will not be recorded in the household registration. Concerning the children born from mobile people, we have unified birth registration system. In some areas, children under 16 are subject to system of temporary registration, and in some areas it's not the case.
To this, I wonder, this temporary residence that you are talking about, I think in earlier years it was difficult to obtain and it was expensive. Is it now easier to obtain and not as expensive? And when children get a temporary residence permit, does this
Microphone, please. At present, the temporary residence certificate does not give the entitlement to the rights of household registration, but children who have been registered in this way can have the same rights to education as the local children. In the places of temporary residence of the parents, they can have compulsory education, and this certificate is provided free of charge. Next, I would like to also...
Mr. Cotran, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I didn't want to interrupt earlier, but Head of Delegation, when you were answering a question regarding the reservation, I believe you said that we're maintaining this reservation in China. We're sticking to our family planning program. Now, the committee doesn't believe there is a contradiction between the right to life and, if you like, a broader issue regarding family planning, but it does need to be in conformity with the convention. My question didn't get an answer. My question had to do with information in the state party's response that investigations or inquiries are currently open under the aegis of the family planning minister against officials who had or alleged to have carried out forced sterilization, which is contrary to the convention. And my question, and I hope that I'll get an answer from you sooner or later, what has happened with these investigations? Have they led to anything? Have they led to convictions? I have another comment on the status of the convention. I believe you said that normally, if there is a conflict, and if there is no reservation on your part, judges can in fact implement or apply the convention, which is completely new information, because in your answers to the series of questions put to you, it was clearly stated that were there to be a conflict between the convention and Chinese law, judges were not empowered to directly implement the convention. So could you sometime give us a definitive answer on this? What would happen if there is a clash, a conflict between domestic legislation and the provisions of the convention? And of course this has to do with most of the provisions. Many of the provisions don't have reservations. So I'd like to know, can judges implement directly or invoke directly the convention? That seems to be the case after what you've said just now. And if that is the case, can you give us examples of where the convention has been directly implemented by judges, or at least reference has been made to the Convention on the Rights of the Child when legal proceedings are carried out or sentences handed down? Thank you.
Thank you. You can have the floor again, sir.
Thank you. Concerning two questions that you mentioned, on your second question first, concerning the relationship between domestic and international law, actually it's a general question, not only concerning this Convention on the Rights of the Child. So, as I said, if there's a conflict, if we do not have a declaration of reservation on the conflict in question, in principle, international convention can be applicable. Off the cuff, I cannot cite you an example concerning this Convention on the Rights of the Child. But as this is a general question concerning law, I can give you another example.
For example, Endangered Species Convention. On this convention, there are provisions. The provisions are not entirely consistent with the provisions of law domestically in China. That is to say, the criminal law of China, there are no direct provisions, or there is no such an offense, a name of offense, provided for in the Chinese law. However, in practice, our courts have the right to directly invoke the provisions of the Convention on the Endangered Species in order to punish relevant crimes or offenses. So as an ordinary a point of law, just to give an ordinary reply to it. As for the point you touched upon earlier, the question, I would like to come up with an answer tomorrow. Thank you.
Can you go on with other questions, or did you want to continue?
I think we still have a lot more questions. Considering, Madam Chair, we at 5:30 we need to conclude. I was told that there is only 16 minutes to go to 5:30. Therefore, I'd like to give these 16 minutes to give them the time to the two delegates of the two SAR, Special Administrative Regions.
Thanks for the members' concern on the rights of children in Hong Kong. I'll respond to some questions, and the remaining part will be dealt with my colleagues tomorrow morning. First of all, the data regarding the collection of data in relation to children, we are pleased to inform the committee that in order to provide easier access to data in relation to children, we have made a consolidated pool of data and information and upload it to the website of the Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Bureau. Information available on the web page includes infant mortality rate, number and percentage of children aged under 18 living in Hong Kong, financial provision on education, etc. Based on suggestions provided to us from NGO representatives, we have revamped the layout of these data and information last year to make it easier to digest and to a certain extent more children-friendly. We welcome opinions from our civil society on other ways to improve the presentation of data and information on the website. On the
excuse me, sir?
Yeah.
Information on views on this, that it is a superficial website, that the data posted there are superficial. Do you have any comment to that? Well, I'm happy to hear that you welcome improvements.
We can make some improvement, of course. Right. On the calling for the establishment of the Children's Commission and also the comprehensive action plan on the children's rights, we are aware that the roles of the Children's Commission as advocated by different commentators in the Hong Kong SAR do vary. Some call for the establishment of an independent monitoring mechanism to oversee the implementation of the convention in Hong Kong and to promote children's rights, while some expect the Children's Commission to play a high-level coordination role within the administration. Others expect that the new establishment would play an advisory role and serve as a formal platform for the government to consult children as well as NGOs concerned on children's matter. As mentioned in my introductory remarks, the Hong Kong SAR government considers that family is an important unit in society. We believe that children are best protected and nurtured within a loving family. Our policy is therefore to preserve and strengthen cohesion within the family, use a family-based approach to provide the necessary care for children, and provide services to families in need. In accordance with this policy objective, the Hong Kong SAR government is all along committed to formulating policies which are conducive to the growth and development of children. In terms of strengthening policy formulation and coordination, we would like to point out that matters concerning the well-being of children involve different policy areas. The relevant policy bureaus will undoubtedly handle matters under their respective purviews, such as formulating specific legislation for protecting the rights of children and earmarking resources for implementing various policies. In case there are matters which involve a number of policy areas, Policy Bureau will coordinate among themselves. We will also suitably coordinate and support through mechanisms such as the Policy Committee under the chairmanship of our Chief Secretary for Administration. In the process of making decisions in relation to children, the relevant policy bureaus will take the best interests of the child as an essential and major factor of consideration. The implementation of various legislation and policies is also monitored by the Legislative Council, the Ombudsman, the media, and the community at large. To strengthen communication among the government, NGOs, and children, we have established the Children's Rights Forum in 2005. I can confirm, member, that children can take part in the forum to express their views on issues that they are concerned. Since its establishment, the Children's Rights Forum has discussed over 30 items, including topics of close relevance to children, such as the legislation for implementing the joint parental responsibility model. The forum encourages the participation of people coming from different sectors who are interested in children affairs and welcome suggestions on discussion items. In 2007, we have further established the Family Council to provide a cross-sector and cross-bureau platform to study and address family-related problems with a view to providing high-level steer and advice and fostering effective coordination and collaboration to maximize efforts and achieve synergy. Since April this year, it became a mandatory requirement for policy bureaus to include family perspectives when formulating policies for different age and gender sectors, including children. They are required to use the 3 sets of family core values: love and care, respect and responsibilities, and communication and harmony as identified by the Council, as well as the impact on family structure and functions as the basics for assessing the effect of their policies on families. They are also required to consider consulting the Council on policies which will affect the family. We believe that such an arrangement will enable policy bureaus to formulate policies which could better suit the family-related needs of women, children, youth, and elderly. The Council...
I'm sorry, I think we have a lot of information on your Family Council. Yes. From before.
Yes.
What is difficult for the committee to accept is this very strong focus on the family. I mean, the convention also promotes the family as the main environment for the child, but at the same time, it promotes the child as a rights holder, as a subject of rights who should participate and have the possibility to stand out with its own views also inside the family. So it's a bit hard to align this strong family focus with children's rights and the Children's Rights Forum. Children themselves complain that not all groups of children are inside this forum, and they cannot choose the issues which are discussed, and they get the information too late. So a children's commission seems to, but I agree with you about the different views of the children's commissions that has also been given to us through all the documentation that we have. But at least it seems to me that the Children's Rights Forum does not fulfill this idea of an independent monitoring body with the possibly even the possibility for being a complaints mechanism for children, which they might need in your country or in your region.
I take your view because we still think that the Children's Forum can make some improvement in the future by listening from the stakeholders in Hong Kong. And we still instate that the collaboration between the Family Council and also the Children's Rights Forum is very important to issue to address the issue on the rights of children. So, Madam Chair, I think the Council you have mentioned has strengthened the cooperation with the Children's Rights Forum. We hope that we can say that also in the future. Madam Chair, can I move to the third question? Can I have time? Do I? Yeah, I can.
It depends on how much time Macau needs. So it's up to the head of delegation.
I think better to stop.
Move. Okay. Right.
Thank you, members, for your questions on Macau. First of all, I'd like to answer some the questions of some members. If there are still time, I'd like our members to respond to. First of all, I'd like to respond to questions from member Cochran, Mr. Cochran. The paragraph 7 of the report mentioned that the Macau SAR in 1999, May 27th, the convention is applicable to Macau without any reservation. And upon the return to the people of China, and the convention continues to be applied in Hong Kong, in the Macau Special Administrative Region. Subsequently, about the plan of action for children. Although Macau SAR, at present there are no plan of action for children as a document, but still Macau SAR devotes great amount of attention and effort to promote the interests of children. The work relating to children, the various departments, they have coordination and do a competent job to help promote the interests of children, to make plan and to provide service for the work of children. And in line with the various needs of children, devise various policies and measures, especially in terms of health, education, and social work. There are interests and rights, the protection, so that children can have their fair, good education and have a good development and growth. Hong Kong SAR, in Macau SAR in recent years have adopted quite a few of provincial policies for children. For example, education grants to children and Macau Youth Policy, and the non-tertiary action plan for education, and also some monitoring system in this regard. At the same time, in Macau, there are dozens of government and NGO, the participation, the committee composed of members from the government and NGOs. Many of these are concerned with the questions of children. For example, Youth Affairs Committee, Education Committee, and Social Work Committee. And also they done a great deal of research on the question of children and on youth. And the government devote more resources to the work of children. In 2012, in the Children's Welfare and Service, the expenditure is approximately 6.7 billion Macau currency, approximately about 830 million US dollars, accounting for 9.25% of the current year expenditure of the government. In addition to that, in legislative affairs and also in our actual work, we actively make efforts to implement policies
and to protect the interests and rights of children in line with the Convention on the Protection of Children, and so that the work can be carried out more effectively and in a more orderly manner, we will intensify our coordination among different departments and bureaus, and to periodically review our implementation work and collect and do research on data and policy on the work of children. Finally, I'd like to respond to a question from Ms. Oviedo Fierro about how Macau SAR to ensure the children in Macau will enjoy better protection against domestic violence. Macau SAR is very much concerned with the protection of minors. The minors who are victims due to various reasons, with regard to them, we try to provide sufficient assistance and protection in order to combat domestic violence against children and to better protect the victims of family violence. Macau SAR government has devised new law of domestic violence, the draft of which is now undergoing the final stage of drafting, and soon it will be sent to the legislature for review, discussion. If the new bill is adopted into a law, it is expected will comprehensively strengthen the protection to assistance to them against violence, especially when children are in a serious danger of domestic violence. Authorities can directly take preventive measures to protect children. For example,
I am sorry, but I think you will have to continue your answer tomorrow, and then we'll get the other answers also on violence by the other delegations. So I will now give the floor back to task force members, this time on the second part of the convention. And Ms. Herzog would like to pose some questions on family first and then on education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome to the delegation of Republic of China, Hong Kong and Macau. And I try to be very, very quick as the time is really precious. Therefore, I'm not making any comments. I'm just asking my questions without any explanation. Otherwise, we are running out of time, although I would love to discuss with you several issues. In your introductory statement, Mr. Head of Delegation, Mr. Chad, you were referring to the obligations of parents. I would like you to draw your attention to the fact also mentioned by you that culturally it is challenging to prioritize child rights and listening to children. Therefore, it is even more important to acknowledge that there are very limited parenting support programs, preparation for parenthood, prevention of abandonment, abuse, neglect, and early intervention, providing information and skills on nonviolent positive nurturing methods of parenting, despite of the law and protection of minors. It was also mentioned by my colleagues that corporal punishment, neglect and abuse is occurring in many, many families in China. What measures have been taken and what plans are there in place to increase parenting capacities by providing more quality services to families, parent education and support programs? In most of the families, both parents are working, and there are many one-parent families as well. The maternity leave is only 98 days in China, and there is a striking shortage of creches, daycare centers for the very young children. According to the WHO recommendations for infants, 6 months exclusive breastfeeding would be essential at least, not only for health reasons, but also to ensure the mother-baby bonding, secure attachment. According to your National Programme for Child Development, there are ambitious plans in this area as well. Are there plans to extend the maternity leave at least to the ILO recommended 18 weeks. How are you planning to implement the integrated early childhood development for 0 to 3 years old? What does integrated means in this case? And what about the quality targets concerning children in daycare, especially as far as the staff and qualification is concerned, not mentioning the other circumstances like the space and the environment? Tens of thousands of children from the Uyghur minority communities have been separated by force from their parents at a very early age, and that is against the right of the child to his or her own family upbringing. Are there any provisions to stop this practice and ensure that all children can stay with their families and attend local kindergartens and schools? According to the estimates, over 60 million children are left behind in China as their parents can only find work far from their original place of living, and as it was mentioned, there are many complications when parents cannot take their children with them based on the fact that kids are not eligible to go to school and having access to healthcare and other services at the new place of living once the parent have to go. This is against the best interest of the child, and this is separating forcefully parents and children. How could you ensure that all parents who have to leave their original place of living and have to go to work somewhere else can take their children with them? I also want to mention at this point that as far as we know, many of those children who are actually abused or excluded in schools also are stigmatized by the fact that their parents are away, and therefore they are even more vulnerable. Migrant and refugee minority children are also often separated from their parents and are forced to go to boarding schools. Same question applies. How can you ensure that the rights of children to be brought up in their own families should be somehow ensured? As far as Hong Kong is concerned, when it comes to family issues, many children are unattended at home and are at great risk from a very early age on, as parents are working long hours. Maternity leave is very limited, if exists at all, for certain groups of employees. Are there any plans also for you to extend the ILO recommendations to your practice and cover all mothers who have young children? What kind of support is provided to families to strengthen their parenting capacities, learning about the developmental needs of children, preventing family breakup, neglect of children, especially taking into consideration the very demanding daycare and school circumstances and the pressure on children from a very early age on? There are thousands of mothers without status in Hong Kong whose children have a Hong Kong residence eligibility due to their fathers, while the mothers cannot work and support them. This is against the best interest of the child and the right to be brought up with the family in a safe environment. How are you planning to resolve this striking issue? Approximately 300,000 domestic helpers are working with permission in Hong Kong, taking care of other families and their children. They are not allowed to bring their own children, however, and in case they are getting pregnant, they either have to leave the Hong Kong or send their children back. This is a very severe violation of those children, especially as these domestic workers have to take good care of those families' children where they are employed. And according to our information, there are many neglect and abuse cases also, because they are not prepared, they don't have any form of qualification, and there is no registration about their capability in this respect. Many people are waiting for public housing, living in absolutely inhuman conditions, in shortage of space and facilities. This is undermining family life and puts kids in all kinds of risks. What are the future programs to provide more public housing available and shortening the waiting lists? Deprivation of family environment. According to the National Programme for Child Development, further support will be given to institutions. Although there are plans to fund kinship care and foster care, the amount of subsidy for institutions is 40% higher. Over 700,000 children are in public care, most of them disabled, without any quality standards, trained staff, review mechanism, complaint and services providing support to the children and with the hope to reunification or family placement. So I'm just wondering, why are you prioritizing institutions to foster care and kinship care, and how could you prevent the institutionalization of these children? It is also clear that this is closely related with the lack of local services, and therefore many parents have to agree to that their children are placed in residential facilities. As far as Hong Kong is concerned, there are also many children in temporary or longer residential care, even under the age of 3. According to our information, there is no time limit to find a parent or reunite children. It takes long years to find a decision. Birth certificates are often missing. So what are the plans to deinstitutionalize these children and prevent the institutionalization of them? How can you support family reunification, kinship and foster care, just like in mainland China? And this is the same question applying in Macau, where a surprisingly high number of children are in institutions, and they are run by NGOs. I couldn't understand from your report, and I would be happy if you could clarify what does these permanent nurseries or nurseries means. That seem to be infant homes and not nurseries, as children are literally living there. As far as education is concerned, and I try to be really short, but there are a huge number of issues here. As far as mainland China is concerned, there is a shortage of early childhood education, and despite of the impressive achievements and plans, there are roughly 60% of the staff who have no formal qualification. And according to the information, there is a fast-growing issue because of the overcrowded kindergartens, preschool facilities, the lack of nurturing and emotionally supportive discipline. The discipline is very often harsh. Corporal punishment is accepted, and children are feeling a big pressure in their everyday life from a very early age on. While in principle education is free, there are many additional costs already in kindergarten and especially in schools. That was partly mentioned. Many parents are not able to pay, so in this context, free education is not in practice free. This applies also in Hong Kong. Secondary schools are not free. Many parents cannot afford them, and even attendance at vocational education is very low in many areas as a consequence of these extra costs or hidden costs. So the question is, how can you ensure that children don't have to pay, or the parents don't have to pay any hidden and extra costs, and the education is not only in principle free? School violence, bullying and discrimination, exclusion of children by the staff and the peers is very common in the schools. I'm just wondering what kind of non-violent anti-bullying, anti-violence programs are there in school. As the head of delegation mentioned in his opening remarks, 300,000 teaching staff has been recruited on a compulsory basis. What kind of quality measures are there, and how are you encouraging the students who have to go to the countryside to teach? And don't you have a fear that this can have a devastating impact on the pupils they are teaching, if this is a kind of punishment for them to spend a couple of years in the countryside? We know this system, there has been such a method in many countries, but it didn't work really well. The recent serious sexual abuse cases in some schools committed against very young children under the age of 10, 12 are clear signs of the problem, and we know that this is only the tip of the iceberg. I also want to mention that those children who've been sexually exploited and abused by the teachers and headmasters and local officials were all children whose parents are working somewhere else, so these are left behind children even more vulnerable than those whose parents are present. Dropout rate seems to be very high, much higher than the official data shows, so I'm just asking what kind of research or surveys are there to improve this situation. there are at certain places shortages of schools, like in Tibet, where the schools are teaching Chinese and not Tibetan. So many children are going to India, also because they cannot cover the costs of the local schools. But there are many, many villages where there is no school at all, so kids cannot attend them. As far as Hong Kong is concerned, early childhood education and care is very limited. It's very expensive, and we know that there are plans to extend the daycare facilities. However, there are many, many scary data on that. I'm just wondering whether there is any plan to make the kindergarten or the preschool free for all children, because that universal opportunity would resolve a lot of issues. And then parents who are working a lot of hours could be ensured that the children are getting high quality free education from an earlier age on. Many children are commuting daily, often many hours from mainland China and back. How would you resolve this program so that all children could go to school according to their place of residence? For migrant children in Hong Kong, the school's language is English. Children is taught as a second language, but often at not a very high quality, and it gives very limited or no chance to children to go to tertiary education, finding better paid jobs. Also, many of these children are segregating, many of these schools are segregating children, and they are referred as the designated schools on the parents' demand. Actually, I guess the parents understand that otherwise their children should be bullied and excluded in the mainstream schools, and cannot follow the very strict regime of the mainstream schools. So the question is, how could you ensure that all children, including migrant children, can have access to high quality education and their Chinese language skills improved, because this would be the minimum standard for them to fulfill their wishes to achieve. Disabled children do not have access often to integrated education, both in China and in Hong Kong. Parents do not get sufficient support. Their isolation is, the children's isolation is blocking their development, and the chances are very limited to find employment and independent living later. So this is also something we should find a good solution, and there are many good programs all over the world, and I'm sure that you have also many plans. As far as the human rights education is concerned, could you let us know whether human rights education is incorporated into teachers and other professionals training in China, Hong Kong and Macau, whether children learn in their school curriculum human rights, about human rights, and how are you encouraging children not only to learn but also exercise their rights in the education system? Thank you very much. I'm sorry for rushing, but we have very limited time. Thanks.
Thank you. I now pass on the floor to Ms. Hiranti Vijayamana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me join my colleagues in extending a warm welcome to the delegation from China, Hong Kong and Macau. I'll also very quickly run through the issues and the questions. I would like to start with to add to what my colleague said regarding disabilities. We certainly are aware of the passage of a mental health law and a preparation of a draft rehabilitation law following ratification of the International Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, development of a national policy and a national plan, and also long-term education plan with reference to special education. But according to the information we have, the services for disabled children seem to be somewhat lagging behind, and there seems to be a large group of children, disabled children with some form of disability, who many of them don't actually attend school. Some, of course, are affected by poverty living in rural areas. And I think there are two issues. One is access to special education, and also the other is access to inclusive education. Now, perhaps this may be an issue which we have come across in some of the documentation, that many of the teachers are not able to get training in special education and inclusive education. So that could be related to some gaps in training of teachers. Another bit of information we have is that children may not be going to school because there is a certain level of discrimination in schools. Maybe some of them don't get enrolled, are refused enrollment, and and there is a certain level of stigmatization. So we would like to know what efforts are made to reduce the stigmatization and the discrimination of children, to encourage them to go to schools, and also provide training for teachers so that they would be welcome in these schools and they also would be afforded education. And that brings me to the next point, and that is, do you have a database on all forms of disability? And also perhaps in some situations, low-cost community-based interventions, which would certainly be more practical, including parent education. One very positive thing that has been done, I think, is the setting up of a hospital-monitored birth defect program, which I believe has been done by China, and the screening of newborns. I think this is to be commended because it means that there is a preventative approach to disabilities, and that the coverage of children are monitored at birth with early intervention, because then that would be a very good way of reducing the numbers of children who end up with disabilities, and also premarital counseling, because sometimes it could be due to congenital causes. So those are very quickly some issues related to disabilities. I would like to then go on to health and health services. I think we have all been have admired the progress that China has made in terms of dramatic declines in maternal and under 5 mortality, eliminating neonatal tetanus, measles, polio. I believe there was an outbreak of polio, and which could be related to some problems with surveillance. But by and large, I think, except for except for pockets of unimmunized children, I think most of the children seem to be reached, and I think polio campaign has been successful. However, we would like to know whether you are going to add other vaccines, which also would be helpful, like Haemophilus B, rotavirus, to this campaign, because it would certainly help in preventing some other infections which affect children. However, there are issues that we feel are still prevalent, related to very much the nutrition of children, infant and young child feeding practices, and very specifically breastfeeding. The information we have regarding exclusive breastfeeding is of some concern, because exclusive breastfeeding rates seem to be going down, and this is also this is actually made worse by the somewhat alarming information of contamination of milk powder, infant formula, with melamine. And it would be good to know exactly what action has been taken regarding that in terms of the safety of infant formula for children, infants. But I think that problem could be sorted out if there is a very vigorous and active breastfeeding program where exclusive breastfeeding is supported for the 6 months and continued feeding thereafter, expanding knowledge of health workers, I think establishing and maintaining baby-friendly hospitals, and also doing baby-friendly status assessments. I think that's important. Looking into issues of maternity leave. Perhaps there are groups of mothers who do get maternity leave, and there are others who don't, and that could also be an issue. And I think certain infant and young child feeding practices also have been identified as contributing to undernutrition among infants and preschool children. Then one more issue related to health is anemia among pregnant women and also young children. And I think supplementation perhaps is a good intervention. Is it something that has been considered, and particularly to vulnerable groups because they might be lacking these important nutrients in their regular diets. Next, I would like to go on to the very important topic of adolescent health. I think this is a global issue, the issues of adolescence, which to a large extent are not given the priority it deserves. Awareness, knowledge, and attitudes related to sexual health and reproductive services. Is there school-based sexual education programs for adolescents where they get knowledge and information about reproductive health? Services, I think that's very important, confidential, accessible services for adolescents. Promotion of life skills, because I think adolescents also are vulnerable to drugs, alcohol, and they need to have the knowledge through which they can prevent being getting on to this type of substance abuse. We do not have much information available on coverage, so it would be good to know what is the coverage of these programs and what level of access do young people have both to reproductive health services as well as life skills education. And also we do have information that perhaps related to the fact that families have one child, a lot of families, that there's a lot of pressure on young people to perform well in school, and so perhaps this can also have mental health problems for them. So they do need counseling, they need support when they are studying. So is there some method through which such confidential counseling and services are provided? Then I would like to touch on the issue of HIV/AIDS. We do know that there are HIV/AIDS is a big issue. There is a lot of stigmatization related to it. So therefore, I think awareness, access to services, confidentiality, all this is very important. And also other sexually transmitted infections. What programs are there in terms of protecting particularly the adolescents and young people, and also programs to prevent mother-to-child transmission of HIV. And thank you.
Didn't you have anything more? I just wanted you to perhaps go a bit swifter through the rest.
Yes.
But you had finished, or?
Yes, I have. Can I finish street children and migrant?
Yes,
yeah, okay.
I think that would be good.
Let me go on to the next topic, and that is related to street children. According to the information we have, there is an estimated number of 150,000 to 300,000. We are not sure whether this is a correct figure. It would be good to know if there is some idea of the extent of the problem of street children. We do know that family breakdown pushes children to become street children, and this could also be related to children of migrant parents who have left their children with other caregivers, and also they are vulnerable to drugs, prostitution, and petty crime. So it would be good to find out what action is being taken to combat with this issue. Are there rehabilitation centers, protection for these homeless minors? Do you have some idea of the extent of the problem? Is it in pockets? Is it more widespread? And also, what action is taken to provide these children with skills training, counseling, behavioral therapy, and most of all, vocational training, so that they could get into gainful occupation? Another group of children that we are concerned about is the migrant children. I think this was referred to by my previous colleagues. Two groups of migrant children that we are interested in. One is, of course, migrants from rural to urban areas. Some of them who leave their children back where they go to cities for work and they leave them with their relatives and perhaps friends. They are definitely children at risk of exploitation, injury, malnutrition, poor school retention and all kinds of problems because of lack of parental support. And then of course there is another group of children of migrants who are in urban areas because they lack the household registration, that they could be also not having access to free health education. And there seems to be a large group of children in this category. So are there any policies and programs which help these two groups of children who are both affected by various problems due to the fact that their parents either have migrated to urban areas with them or they have migrated, leaving them with poor care facilities in their own villages? I think I was quick enough.
Thank you, Ms. Vijamana. We have 2 minutes left for Mr. Kotran to start his presentation of questions, or his questioning, and then you will go on for 10 minutes tomorrow morning before the delegations can answer the questions. So please go ahead.
Oui. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I have some questions regarding the situation of refugee children and asylum seeker children, regarding the economic exploitation of children, including child labour, and a range of questions regarding the administration of justice for minors, and also questions regarding measures taken to protect the rights and interests of children who are victims and witnesses of crime. And finally, follow-up questions to our concluding observations regarding the optional protocol on the sale of children, child prostitution and child pornography. So, Madam Chair, we could take the questions which are really at the heart of my concern. Perhaps, bearing in mind the time available, it may well be better to put off those questions to tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Oh, but you can ask me,
yeah. Okay. Just now I was asking Madam Chair if members agree. Of course, if our interpreters can understand, in order to better prepare our answers, my suggestion is, if Madam Chair, you agree, maybe Mr. Rapporteur can ask his questions today.
For a long time is that we don't have interpreters. They have their job until 6 o'clock. They have accepted to go on for 5 minutes, I think.
Chinese booth is
maximum.
The Chinese booth is the head of team, has to decide.
Maximum.
Maximum what? 5 minutes?
10 minutes. Yeah.
Mr. Kotran can go on.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente, et merci.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and Mr. Kotran thanks the interpreters for facilitating our lives. So, I'd like to talk about the situation of refugee children, asylum seeker children, and there is a commitment from China taken in 2011 in order to settle the situation of refugees, particularly Indo-Chinese refugees. However, the children born in China from former Indo-Chinese refugees, those children have not been able to benefit from Chinese nationality. Our committee is also concerned at the fact that children coming to China from the DPRK are categorically deemed to be economic migrants and sent back without taking into account whether there is a risk to irreparable harm done to them. Secondly, the state party has failed to recognize the Kachin asylum seekers despite their situation, and I believe have also sent them back to Yunnan in Burma in 2012, where there is a real risk of irreparable harm done to the children, including the fact that they will be exposed to the combat, fighting there. As regards the Hong Kong SAR, we note as positive their decision to allow asylum seeker children to have access to public education. However, we're concerned at the lack of special care for them when they come into Hong Kong. There are administrative practices which boil down to detaining unaccompanied children who come to Hong Kong, sometimes by air, and they're put into detention centres for minors. Those are concerns. My questions are: what provisions are envisaged by China in order to respect particularly the principle of non-refoulement of children when they come to the country, and guarantee that the Kachin refugee children benefit from a temporary protection regime because of the conflict in their country, and also regularize the status of the Indo-Chinese refugees as soon as possible, and also, as regards Hong Kong, ensure that there is no arrest of unaccompanied children when they come to the country. My second concern has to do with economic exploitation, including child labour. We know that China has undertaken to prohibit economic exploitation and child labour in its National Development Programme or Plan 2011-2020. However, we are concerned at the absence of disaggregated data regarding child labour in your country. Also concerned at the fact that children are employed in the worst forms of child labour sometimes, certainly in dangerous work. Sometimes they're employed in mines, manufacturing industry and the brick industry. And also the fact that there is a mismatch between the minimum age of admission to employment and the age of the end of compulsory schooling. And we would certainly be very thankful to the State Party if you give us information on the measures taken or envisaged in order to address these problems. And also, are you considering the ratification, or do you intend to ratify ILO Convention 189, the recent convention on decent work for domestic workers? And I now move on to the administration of juvenile justice. The committee welcomes and has welcomed, and in fact I personally welcome, the amendment to the Chinese Criminal Proceedings Code or Criminal Procedure Code. We also note that there are discussions regarding reforming the so-called re-education through labour programme. However, we're deeply concerned at the generalised widespread persistence of this re-education through labour and the apprenticeship schools, the Gondu Shueisha schools. Also the fact that there is no access to legal guarantees or representation. Children can be detained in these re-education centres, and this detention can last up to 18 months, according to the State Party report. Reports talk about children being abducted or detained in secret for days or months with their parents, or in the absence of their parents or tutors, known as the black jails, as prisons. Also allegations of torture, ill treatment, children being deprived of sleep and food. This is perpetrated against children in these secret detention centres. Madam Chairperson, as regards Hong Kong SAR, we restate our concern given the fact that criminal responsibility is very low. It's 10 years of age. As regards the Macau SAR, we note with interest the information provided as regards intended reform of the juvenile justice system. Notwithstanding, we're concerned at information coming regarding the lack of restorative justice for children in conflict with the law and the persistence of the excessive practice of solitary confinement. So solitary confinement that can be applied to children during the night as well. What measures are being taken in order to remedy this? Again, just a few words before we end. What measures do you intend to take in the future? Because we don't have sufficient information. What do you intend to do to protect the rights of children who are victims or witnesses of crimes, as well as victims of crimes? I'm thinking in particular of those who are victims of economic or sexual exploitation, abduction, victims of trafficking, as well as children who are witnesses of such acts. And again, just to keep an eye on the time, to respect the time frame, the extra time that's been given by the interpreters. This has to do with follow-up to our concluding observations regarding the initial State Party report regarding the protocol on sale, child prostitution and child pornography. We have some information in the State Party's report in that regard, but we regret the fact that the information don't really answer the very specific and legal questions that we have put. So I ask again, what provisions are to be taken by the State Party with a view to modifying the Criminal Code of 1997 to prohibit all forms of sale and trafficking of children, and also regarding sale of children, and that you should amend your legislation in order to abolish the condition of double criminality if there is, as regards extradition and prosecution. Where do you stand as regards extraterritorial competence for all offences committed abroad by Chinese people or those who habitually reside in China, or whenever the victims of these offences are Chinese children? Thank you very much. And Mr. Cotran, thanks again to the interpreters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cotran. I think this is a very effective or efficient time limit. You've made a new record for posing your questions quickly. And thank you very much to the interpreters who have stayed with us for at least 9, possibly 10 extra minutes. Then I would just like to finish off by wishing you a nice evening and see you again tomorrow.